much, Gareth. Rushanara.
Thank you. I've got some questions around economic crime, and I'm going to start with money laundering and then go on to the online safety bill. So the FCA succeeded in securing the conviction of NatWest for failing to exercise proper money laundering controls. Is it correct that this is the first money laundering prosecution that the FCA has conducted?
It's the first criminal prosecution against a bank.
Okay. And why did the NatWest prosecution take so long, given the offences took place in 2016?
The chair's written a letter to me on this topic. The committee will understand that the sentencing has not yet taken place. We're anticipating a court hearing in the not too distant future, at which point the basis of our case and the facts around that case will be more public, and I'll be in a position to give you a bit more information at that point.
And why did you choose to prosecute NatWest and not Standard Chartered, who you fined over £100 million in 2019? What were the differences between the cases? I mean, I know it's before your time, but perhaps Charles can come in if...
You could put me, I think, on the criminal prosecution, if you could just give us I don't think it's going to be too long now before there'll be more information available, and you'll be able to see the nature of the offence and why we chose a criminal prosecution in that case, and we'll be able to give you more information.
Why,
we will always consider...
Would that explain why you didn't pursue the criminal route for Standard Chartered?
I think that when we can write to you about the NatWest case, it'll be much easier for us to explain why it was a criminal prosecution.
Would you be able to explain to us?
And I think it'll be also clear from that why, by comparison, that wasn't the case in Standard Chartered. But I do think it's going to be very difficult for us to give you answers today on that, given the restrictions that we're under in terms of the court.
Okay, well, I'll ask you a general question on that then. Can we now expect you to be looking for more prosecutions and fewer regulatory fines for failure to prevent money laundering going forward?
I said publicly, I said in July at the business plan, we want to be assertive, we want to test our powers to the limit, and that includes taking criminal prosecutions for the most egregious failings.
So I mean, Britain's got, on the one hand, this country's got a good reputation about, around financial services, but on the other hand, there's a lot of concern about money laundering and London being a route for money laundering. Today a report's just come out, hot off the press. It's called The UK's Kleptocracy Problem by Chatham House. And the sort of issues they've raised, which is not directly your responsibility, but, unpoliced and often unenforceable anti-corruption laws have made the UK the global money laundering capital for a post-Soviet Union elite, severely damaging Britain's international reputation and the rule of law, says this think tank. Given this, what other powers do you think you need? And what else? This is a question that's particularly relevant for our other inquiry in economic crime, and we keep revisiting the subject. What other powers do you think you need to prevent financial institutions from laundering money?
Well, we do get a mention in the Chatham House report in the capacity of being the Office for Professional Body Anti-Money Laundering Supervision, and we have a really important role in supervising other bodies that, for lawyers and others who should supervise money laundering. We've been very clear that what we found, that's a relatively new responsibility for us. We've been very clear that what we found is not good enough, and that this network of what I think the report calls a network of enablers is not strongly regulated enough, and that includes estate agents and lawyers and all sorts of intermediaries who assist people to come to the UK and live in great style or to launder the proceeds of their crimes here. So I'm really pleased that we're upping the game for the other professional bodies. It's really important we continue to do that with a lot of focus. I think in terms of our own interventions in both proactive supervision of firms, the sort of actions that we've taken in terms of penalties and criminal prosecutions, have announced that we're here and we mean business in this area.
Charles Randall, would you say that you've got the right powers, or these enablers, so-called enablers, according to the report, that there need to be further powers
I think that what was very interesting about the report was the fact that it draws together the need for a system-wide approach to this, and whether we're talking about Companies House or whether we're talking about the National Economic Crime Centre and the various agencies that participate in that, and then the various professional bodies who play roles. It needs a system-wide solution. I think the National Economic Crime Centre has been established in order to produce that system-wide solution, but I would be the first to say that there's, across the system, that there's more that needs to be done.
I'd make 2 points, if I could, just add to that, on powers specifically, as you're asking. I think one is data sharing.
Yep.
And the ability to share data between public and private sector, but also between public sector agencies. For example, HMRC has some very highly relevant information for money laundering, but clearly there are always sensitivities about the way in which tax data are shared across the system. And that is something that we need to be thinking about as to how we can find solutions to enable the intelligence that might be able to be gained from their data to be used. Secondly, it's a more technical point, which we have, I think, drawn the attention to the committee of before, which is some of our powers lapse at the point that a firm falls out of authorisation or registration. Right. So our ability to pursue investigations can be compromised if they deregister or deauthorise, right, which is a technicality, but has been a challenge in one or two situations.
So that's an area to work on. So moving on, because I'm conscious of time, moving on to the online safety bill. In your evidence to the Joint Committee on the Online Safety Bill, you strongly supported extending the bill to include paid-for online advertising, and I could say that we unanimously on this committee think it's a good idea. But given it's already illegal to advertise unauthorised financial products anyway, do you think what are the areas in which there needs to be sort of built in the provision for prevention that you've called for in the evidence you gave? Do you think there should be a duty of care as part of the online companies, as part of the provision, and should there be a regulatory body to oversee that? And in addition, should online companies be liable for compensation where there are particular cases of bad behaviour? I know it's quite a few questions, but it's well rehearsed. So
I think we've made our position clear, and we're very grateful for the committee's engagement and support on this. I think we've asked for two things. One is that fraud becomes a priority harm in the online safety bill, and secondly that paid-for advertising also gets included. I think the question of liability, I think, is really a question for other policymakers to judge, because you're weighing up a whole range of issues as you make that judgment. There is definitely, to your earlier questions around financial crime more generally, there's definitely an appetite, I think, from the financial services industry to see tech companies and telecommunications companies contributing more to the industry-wide funding and efforts to tackle financial crime, given that they are often the transmission mechanism for a lot of that activity.
Okay. So, and in relation to the case of this emerged in relation to the £600,000, I think, that cost you to take the adverts that Google, I believe, had. You then paid them to take fraudulent products off their sites. They have since offered you $3 million in credit. What have you used that $3 million in credit for? Was it more online advertising of dodgy products that they'd put up? And have you got the 600k back?
We haven't got the 600k back.
Would you like it back?
We'd like it back, but our latest conversations with Google are I'm not expecting that in my Christmas stocking. But I understand the Treasury Committee has engaged on it. We will take up the offer of advertising credits, and we will use that advertising to sensitise consumers to the risks that they may face if they click on some of the links that might feature.
Have you used much of it?
No, we haven't used it. We're in discussions around how we may use that.
Do you envisage that being about prevention, or is it going to be about more of taking fraudulent products advertised by Google to take it off, which would be rather ironic, would it not?
This is going to be more about prevention.
Okay.
The point around the gateway, Google's obviously done what they've done on their policies, which came at the end of August, and I think that is a helpful step, and then clearly the legislation would be more decisive than anything we could do.
And Google's not the only culprit here. Others are Facebook and other online companies. And I don't know if you were aware that it's a related issue around harms. Facebook is now going to be sued by Rohingya Muslims because of the contribution, according to the UN, for playing a determining role in the Myanmar genocide. And I think they're suing them for 150 billion. I mean, that's a group of people who've been persecuted, and a million of them expelled to another country. And it's a UK-US case. It's enormously courageous of them. Don't you think our institutions and our government should be getting their act together and making sure on this side, on financial crime, given how serious some of these activities are and crimes are on the side of incitement to violence here, that they need to get their skates on? Because what we heard recently with the minister's response was that there was some sort of there were some barriers to making the appropriate changes that you are asking for in relation to financial crime here. Do you feel confident that anything's going to happen in terms of the changes that you're asking for and we're all asking for in the online safety bill?
I make the general point that it's not. You're right. It's not just Google. We're talking to other platforms too. And one of the reasons we want the powers is because it's very time-consuming to have to seek to persuade every single platform to adopt a similar approach, each through negotiation, each through their own specific procedures, and has got a different perspective on it. And I think having a common approach is going to be most effective to stop arbitrage. I certainly think we're having good constructive conversations with the government about the online safety bill. In many respects, you'll be closer to that determination than us, because it's now before Parliament to decide, and there's going to be a period when there's a possibility for amendments to be tabled. But I certainly, and I heard what the Economic Secretary said here, and I was grateful for his comments that he was very sympathetic to what the FCA had been presenting in terms of the change that was needed.
Charles Randall, did you want to come in?
No, I mean, I was also very pleased to see the comments that the Economic Secretary made, and I'm very hopeful that we will see progress on this issue. We need to move beyond the idea of the FCA being given free advertising credits to try and neutralise, harmful advertising. We actually need to move into a world where, as they do with other things, with coronavirus, for example, if you were to search on Google about coronavirus, you'll get some public health information at the top of your search result that Google will put there for you. And I would like to see the same for a variety of search terms that are likely to lead consumers in the direction of harmful products, and that would be part of the duty, as if you like. Is
there a risk that because it requires cross-governmental discussion agreement, and it's not the Treasury Minister responsible require cooperation with Home Office and DCMS, it might fall between stools? And what would be your advice in making, and your own role in making sure it actually happens, this change is made?
My sense is, we're talking to the Treasury, we're talking to DCMS, we talk to the Home Office, we're talking to Ofcom as well, who would have the lead responsibility coming out of this. But I think everybody is engaged on this topic. I'm not seeing that this is not a topic that is not getting cross.
Finally, since you mentioned Christmas stockings and the 600k, isn't it mean-spirited of Google not to pay back the 600k, and shouldn't they?
We would, of course, prefer to.
Just in time for Christmas.
We would, of course, prefer to be refunded, but obviously it's a commercial decision, and they've made their position known, including to this committee.
Charles Randall?
Well, I would adopt what Nicola's said. I would just like to say that I was really pleased that Google moved on this, and I'm very determined that we make sure that the focus is equally applied to Facebook, Instagram, to TikTok. We see a lot of harm potentially coming through on those platforms as well. So we need to make sure that we're focusing on the whole problem. The only solution to that ultimately is going to be, I think, legislative.
You haven't had to pay any other companies like you have Google, have you?
We've paid, I think we shared the figures with the committee before. We have paid some other companies, yes.
And did you get any of that back?
No.
No. So not just Google, a number of others. Can you just remind me which other companies haven't paid you back?
I'll have to write to you on the details. I think, can I just come back to you on that, please?
Well, I hope they pay you back before Christmas too.